Yeah, I had every single symptom. The main one for me was not feeling connected to the world and objects and people. It was so weird how I could touch things and they didn't feel real. And I was just like, why? Like, it was just crazy to go through that. When you had a world previously where everything felt real and you could feel that happiness, in your mind. But when you're depersonalized, you can't feel that. It's just like numbness, and you want to so bad.
Hey everyone, I'm Sean O'Connor, author of the Depersonalization Manual, and today I'm speaking with Laura Carlson from Perth, Australia. Laura had multiple experiences with DP and DR since she was 13 years old, which unfortunately went misdiagnosed for years. It was only after the most recent and most intense experience with DPDR that she was finally able to understand and address the condition properly. But thankfully, Laura is now fully recovered and is with us today to tell us about her experience with and recovery from depersonalization disorder. Laura, you're very welcome to the channel. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
Yeah, pleasure. Laura, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so basically, I'm a full-time mum. I'm working part-time with disabilities at the moment. I'm just pretty busy with family life and just getting my life back onto track after everything I went through last year. Um, and yeah, just seeing friends and, family, having fun, going out whenever I can. So yeah, it's a bit about me at the moment.
What age are you, Laura?
Yeah. I am 28 years old.
28, okay. And what's it like being a new mum?
It's amazing. It's really life-changing. I recommend everyone to do it in their life. Yeah.
Excellent. That's great. I'm delighted to hear that things are going so well. So, Laura, can you tell us a little bit about your experience with DPDR and how did it start for you?
Yes. Okay. So I had a really traumatic life. I won't get into too much detail, but just a really broken home, a lot of traumatic events in foster care and things like that. I remember I was 13 when I had my first episode. I had a really bad panic attack, and it was like a switch had just come over me. Everything around me just seemed fake and really scary. But because I was so young, I didn't know what it was. Um, I thought I just had depression, so I just went along with things. I saw a psychologist at the time. She didn't pick up anything with me. Um, I just went through lots of sessions with her and talk therapy. I felt a little bit better at times, but still, I had these symptoms for years. Um, I had another really bad panic attack at work when I was 24. And again, everything seemed really unreal and scary. And I had, all the symptoms. And I researched it then on Google, the symptoms, and just found out that it was DPDR. I had a look at a few other people that were making content videos, spoke to other people. Again, I went through the symptoms and just went through life ignoring it. It was only until like last year when I had my baby, I went through a bit of a stressful time and I was just really exhausted. So I think a lot of fatigue brought it on. Um, and yeah, that's when I had another episode.
And
Mm.
and when you had it at first at 13, Laura,
Yeah.
was there anything specific that kind of triggered at that point, or was it just was it a panic attack? And also the same when it happened at 24, was it a panic attack that set it off?
It was a lot of overthinking, and just a build up. And then I had reached a point where I had a panic attack, and it was like my body couldn't handle what was going on. So I believe for me that it just made me like dissociate to everything around me to kind of protect me in a way.
Yeah, yeah. And when you had it back when you were 13, did it did it persist long after that, or was it a short kind of contained experience?
The symptoms went on for years. I mean, like looking in the mirror, not recognizing myself, looking at my hands, not recognizing myself. At times, I would feel connected to people. My main emotion was feeling numb a lot of the time. Um, but I didn't have the constant panic attacks that I did last year. Last year was the worst for me. I didn't have the existential thoughts, I think, because of my age and I was really young. And I really did not know what it was. And I couldn't explain that to anyone. And I thought if I did, people would think I'm just crazy. So I never really spoke about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when I experienced DPDR first, that was one of my main concerns, was that like if I was able to, anytime I tried to verbalize what I was experiencing, I remember thinking that this is not something a sane person would say. Like if I felt like I was like reality wasn't real, or I felt like my memories weren't mine or something like that. And that was when I was 25 years old. So I mean, I can imagine what it was like for what it must have been like for you as a 13-year-old to be going through those experiences and try to speak about them to people.
Yeah. It was definitely really scary for me. And like I said, I went through a lot during that time. Mm.
Yeah. So the first time did it happen, or when you were 13, how many years, how much time did the DP and DR persist after that?
Well, like, I mean, I had the symptoms still for a long time. Um, but they would come and go. It was like I wasn't fully recovered anyway. I mean, because I just went on with things like distractions and like I think I've always been an anxious person. So to me it wasn't really anything.
Mm,
Um, it was only until I had the next one at 24 and I was like, there's something wrong. There's something going on. And I really need to get this sorted. But again, there's not much help out there really. Um, there's medication, there's talk therapy, but you have to really work hard on yourself and your mindset to overcome it. And I think that's what I did last year, and that's why I had really significant results. Yeah,
that's great to hear, and it's interesting as well that like one of the benefits actually of sometimes experiencing something like this as a teenager, when if you're quite young, is that
yeah,
your 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 focus isn't that developed. So you tend to have a short attention span, which can actually be beneficial because it's almost easier to
yeah,
distract a kid or a teenager
yeah,
and not get into like kind of constant existential questions, because like you have to go and
yeah,
you gotta go and play ball, you gotta meet your friends, like you're
yeah,
constantly
yeah,
kind of on the move. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Whereas
And
whereas
at
in your
that time, yeah, no,
please go
I was
on.
just about to say at that time at 13, things around me weren't too scary. I noticed it most last year with the existential thoughts.
Hmm.
And I guess because you're older, you start to have more like in-depth thoughts, like, things like solipsism. I don't know if that
Yeah.
was a big one for you, but
Hmm.
thinking like, am I the only person in the universe? Is everyone around me like fake? The Matrix was another big one for me. And those are things I wouldn't have thought about when I was 13 or watched at all.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I literally I couldn't look at a DVD of The Matrix without,
Yeah, yeah,
I couldn't
same.
walk past it in the video shop
I
without
know.
having a panic attack, like, because it would
Yeah,
just set it
me
off,
too.
Yeah,
Yeah, and for
yeah,
some reason they played it every week here in Australia on on Go and 7 plus.
yeah,
So I was
yeah.
like switching off the TV and just trying to avoid everything I could.
Yeah.
Inception was another big one as well.
Hmm.
So just
Yeah,
the mind ones, yeah.
yeah, yeah. The Truman Show was another one for me as well.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was a big one for me too.
yeah, yeah.
Definitely.
I think the
And I
fact that
also
sorry, go ahead.
I was about to say videos online, even talking about DP at that time last year, it was horrible. I had to stop talking to people and going on the channels. It was just way too much. It was just constant triggers all the time. People saying that they had to have it for years. Their gym recovered. They heard about friends who, committed suicide and things. And I was thinking, oh my God, my life is over. I'm never going to get out of this.
With any anxiety-based condition, like the hyper awareness of triggers is everywhere, and it can be extremely intense, especially when you're kind of at the height of it and you don't know why it's happening.
Oh,
Then
the height of it is the worst.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit more about the symptoms that you experienced, Laura? I mean, kind of, both when you were 13 and also 24 and most recent one. What were the symptoms that were most troublesome for you?
I had everything. I think, I had every single symptom. The main one for me was not feeling connected to the world and objects and people. It was so weird how I could touch things and they didn't feel real. And I was just like, why? Like, it was just crazy to go through that. When you had a world previously where everything felt real and you could feel that happiness, in your mind. But when you're depersonalized, you can't feel that. It's just like numbness, and you want to so bad just feel happiness and to laugh and to feel that. For me, that was the hardest thing. But I had every single symptom. I had last year was the worst. Racing heart, constant nausea, fatigue, the vision problems, floaters, 2D vision. It's like everything had lost its liveness. I stopped eating a lot. I had appetite problems, sleep problems. I had really bad nightmares all the time and constant panic attacks. They were just like never ending. I was so much in my head thinking about these existential thoughts. I was researching them, trying to get reassurance from people. I think, as you know, like I even emailed you during that time because I was like, had thoughts like, what if this DP manual isn't even real? And it's like another part of the dream. Like, that's how intense the existential thoughts were. They had just kept going and going and going, and it didn't stop. And so I had every single thing you could think of. Looking in the mirror and not recognizing yourself, feeling like you are a stranger. I remember go for walks with, my partner and my friends, and just feeling like a ghost, that you're just not there in your body, that you're just like outside of it, or everywhere. And I had a lot of memory problems and time loss. It's like I had missed chunks of the day. You'd notice just like the sun going down, and you'd be like, oh, well, that's just happened. I've missed all of that. You miss events that have happened like years ago. It's just really crazy how it all comes together. And I think mine was a lot of, the trauma side of things. I think this will be really helpful for people who have had trauma in their life to hear all this. Yeah.
Certainly. The existential thoughts were a major thing for me as well. I remember like having like almost a physical reaction when they would happen as well. Like my stomach would sink and I would tense up, and I remember like walking down the street between my hometown one day, and I felt like a ton of bricks had been dropped on me. And I can't remember what specifically the thought was, but it was something like that. It was maybe about like the size of the universe, or the worry that like, what if I'm just in the matrix? I'm a brain in a jar somewhere. Like that kind of stuff would completely freak me out. When you're going through it at first, like it's so frightening, and it feels so specific as well, and specific to you. But what's really interesting is that, as you recover, you start to see that like the reason that those thoughts are happening is that, first of all, those types of thoughts, like on a fundamental level, like intrusive, catastrophic thoughts, are common to all anxiety-based conditions. Okay, so for somebody with claustrophobia, they'll be walking down the street and they'll think, what if I get on the subway and it's packed and then it breaks down or a bomb goes off or something, and that'll hit them like a ton of bricks, and it's terrifying. But with DP and DR, because you have this feeling of disconnection from the world around you, which again is part of your body's fight or flight response, but you combine that with the sense of introspection of trying to figure that out, combined with racing catastrophic thoughts. And of course, you're going to be jumping to conclusions about like, well, what is reality? What is the nature of my existence? This type of thing. But as I always say to people, and I wish I could have said to myself back then, like the thing about those thoughts is that they're not based on logic, and the mistake that we make is that we try to bring logic to them, and we try to bring like a philosophical bent to them. We're like, okay, so what's the philosophy of solipsism? Can I bring to this? But the thing is that like the intrusive catastrophic thought is not based on logic; it's based on anxiety. So you're not going to win. Yeah. So you're not going to get into an argument with this thought and win. In the same way that you're not going to get into an argument with heart palpitations and win, or muscle tension or sweating. They're not there to be argued with. They're not based on logic. That becomes more and more clear as your recovery continues, as I'm sure you know yourself, Laura. But I mean, but certainly while you're going through it and attempting to explain it to yourself and to others, it can feel so frightening. Which brings me to my next question, actually, Laura. So can you tell us a bit more about your experience of like dealing with like doctors or therapists over the time, and how was it explaining the condition to them, and what was that experience like for you?
Yeah. Before I say that, I'll just say back to your other question just before. You in your forums and stuff like that in your recovery, you said in one of the videos that having a thought that's really scary about the world and stuff is just the same as having, a thought about what you're going to have for breakfast, but we put that onto it. Do you know what I mean? So we make that a scary thought because thinking about life and death and things like that, it's actually not really a scary thing to think about. It's the same as thinking about what you're going to do tomorrow and what are you going to do today and things like that. So yeah,
absolutely, and I mean the perfect example. I mean that is a great example as well. And another example is like, if we were having this conversation back when I was in the midst of DP back in 2005, and you mentioned,
it doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Well, if you mentioned The Matrix or Inception, like I would freak out. I'd have a meltdown because I'd be like, why is she talking about The Matrix? Is it because we're in the Matrix? And so even the mention of it would set me off. Whereas now, like, I mean, I'm like, well, The Matrix is obviously a masterpiece. I watched Inception last week, right? I have it on Blu-ray. It's amazing. It's one of my favorite films. But it's like, that just demonstrates so clearly that like it's not like the thought or the discussion of The Matrix or Inception or The Truman Show that is frightening. It's not inherently frightening. It's the anxiety levels of the person who is interacting with that thought that makes it feel scary and frightening. It's not like the film hasn't changed. It's me who has changed. So the thought itself, as you're saying, Laura, is not inherently frightening. It's actually fascinating. But once we reduce with recovery, the more distance we get from that anxiety, the more we realize that there was nothing actually frightening about those thoughts or those movies or whatever. Yeah,
that's all right. Okay. And we'll talk about the doctors. So when I was 13, I was misdiagnosed They just said I had severe depression and anxiety. They gave me sleeping tablets. Yeah, helped a little bit, but never recovered me fully. Um, Last year with my really bad episode, I spoke to a psychiatrist and a psychologist, and I said to them, I'm going into psychosis. I am going crazy. And every time I saw him, he said to me, You're not going crazy. If you're going crazy, you wouldn't know about it. And he said to me, Do you see things outside the window? And I said, No, I don't. I just feel like I'm losing my mind and going crazy. And he just had to keep reassuring me. And then I realized that I have to reassure myself and somehow get through it. I can't rely on, these doctors and this medication. So, I try to do different approaches.
Okay. Well, it sounds like that doctor who you were just describing there was fairly on the ball, like was able to kind of take that worry and just kind of explain, okay, you're not going crazy. Here's the reasons why you're not going crazy, like, which is what we all need to hear at some point with DP and DR,
Yeah. But when you're going through that hard time, anyone can tell you that, but it doesn't help. You definitely feel like you're losing your mind. You need to find ways to relax yourself for a long period of time, and then your brain changes. That's what I believe.
Certainly, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's for me it was like once I found out what the term was, I found out that there was a thing called depersonalization, and that all the symptoms that I had, which felt to me like I must have been going crazy, were actually part of this spectrum of symptoms of DPDR, and seeing people say, like, okay, this is anxiety, you're not going crazy, and also here's the reasons why you're not going crazy, one of which is like reality testing, like the difference between kind of anxiety and psychosis, and that, like, they're a different worlds, like they have nothing to do with each other. That kind of stuff was very, very reassuring, and kind of gave me the platform from which I was able to start to let go of those worries and get back to a non-anxious state. At what point, Laura, did you come across the term depersonalization? Like, would this have been kind of after your second episode at 24, or was it before that?
Yes. Yeah. No, it was my second episode. So I had gone all those years not knowing what it was, thinking it might be a little bit of anxiety, but not knowing it was a full condition. So when I discovered it, I was just so amazed. I was like, that's what I have. I spoke to other people. I don't know if you know Jeff Abigail, Harris Harrington. I'm sure a lot of people know these people from searching on YouTube. They have like good videos, but they don't have any manuals or anything. They just have a lot of talk videos. So I listened to a lot of those and joined Facebook forums, spoke to people, and it did help, but it still didn't recover me.
So was it through Google, or that, like, did you came across the term depersonalization one day, you clicked on it, and you were like, oh my God, that's the thing?
Yeah. I typed in Google, I was like feeling like you're in a dream, feeling I don't feel like I'm not real. I think I Googled into that, and then it came up straight away.
And how did that change things for you? Were you excited to see it, or was this? Yeah.
I was so amazed that there was actually a disorder for this, and that there was other people who have this symptom and this disorder. I was just so surprised. It was crazy.
So you've had it at 13 and it went on for a couple of years. Then you had it again at 24. And was that again a couple of years again, Laura, or was it a couple of months, or how long was it? How long was that when you had 24?
The worst of it lasted a couple of weeks, and then I had just medication like lorazepam, Ativan. It's just like an anti-anxiety, and that helped get the really bad symptoms away. And eventually that it stopped, like, for a little bit, but I still had the bits of feeling like I was in a dream and still feeling numb. So it's still like it helps a little bit, but it doesn't recover it fully. And that's the thing with medication, things like that. It can help temporarily, but it's not 100% fixed.
I had a similar experience with medication in that I I took it and I was lucky enough to be on a medication it worked for me, as in it reduced my levels of anxiety, which in turn
Mm.
reduced the symptoms of DP. It didn't get rid of them completely, but it reduced them. But my mistake was that, like, I just said, well, I'll just take the medication until I've recovered. And I didn't do anything to change my habits or my behaviors or how I thought about the condition. So once I came off the medication, I was kind of back to square one. And the anxiety just came right back. And the existential thoughts, perfect example. The existential thoughts came right back because I hadn't changed how I thought about them, because I was just like, well, I hope the medication makes them go away, as opposed to, like, I need to
Yeah.
understand what these thoughts are and why I don't need to be afraid of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to do a lot of work on yourself. And I think you have to set up a lot of boundaries with people if you're getting stress from work or family life. There's just a lot of things that you really have to work on and come to terms with your trauma. I think a lot of people who dissociate, they don't want to really feel what they've been through. And it gets pushed aside. They don't really want to deal with it because it's all really scary stuff. So I think, yeah, you have to accept a lot from the past and look at things differently, and yeah, just really change your view on things.
It might be a bit of a tough question, Laura, but hope you don't mind my asking. So what was, through all this time, what was your lowest point in the whole experience?
It was last year when I was a first time mum. My baby was a few weeks old and I was having constant panic attacks every second of pretty much every day for a couple of weeks. And I remember literally just standing outside and looking at the sky and wondering if it was real, crazy things like that. And I was like, I really can't go on with this every single day. Like, I'm struggling to get through a whole day. I really have to do something about it. I went online again and tried to do the best I could and tried to find a manual that I thought was actually going to help me, because I actually looked into a few. There was another person who wanted to charge, $2,000 to work through having interviews, and I knew that wasn't for me. Like, I knew something. I like reading and things like that, so it was good for me to have that on my computer as well and to really go back into things. I think people with DP and DR, they obsess all the time about things. They have, and probably an underlying like OCD. So it was me looking at the videos again and again until it really clicked to me, until I really implemented them.
Yeah, I think with people with DP and DR, there's definitely a sense of constantly checking on the condition, which is the basis of essentially of all anxiety-based conditions, is like taking a specific symptom or specific behavior and checking on it over and over and over and over again. So with DP and DR, it could be like the sensation of being cut off from the world around you, which again is part of your body and brain's defense mechanism. But you focus on it and we say something's wrong, I'm going crazy, I'm going to die. And then you keep checking on the levels of that feeling that you're experiencing. So, okay, I'm going to go for a run, and how do I feel afterwards? Check the feeling. I'll try and sleep this off, and then you wake up, and the first thing you do in the morning, you check to see is the feeling there. So there definitely is kind of an obsessive kind of checking aspects to it. But again, which is part of all anxiety-based conditions. Like, I mean, for somebody with like chronic claustrophobia, they will be constantly checking on, like, how is this going to affect my day today? Do I need to get into a car today? Do I need to get to an elevator today? How can I avoid the elevator? Are there stairs that I can take? I'm going to check that, So it's that obsessive kind of checking in the condition and the environment and situations surrounding the condition that kind of just consumes you. Like it just becomes all day, every day. That's what I did. I just researched it all day, every day, thought about it, but I read everything I could about it, watched everything I could about it. Yeah, absolutely everything. And Laura, did you experience any visual changes as a result of the DP and DR?
Yeah, so that was a really big thing for me. I noticed the life around me and what I knew just looked like props in like a movie kind of thing. It just looked like colorless, like it was missing something. It lost its depth. It was just really strange. It was like I'd been pulled out from one world to another world, and I was seeing something completely different. And it lost that emotion, you know, like when you look at something that makes you happy, you don't feel that. So it's definitely all that anxiety and the depression, I think.
Yeah, I certainly would have had that with the visual stuff as well, where I remember like looking around my family home and just thinking like this it doesn't look real, or something looks off, and it felt like it was 2D. Like everything just it looked like I was kind of there was this like watching a screen kind of following my vision around. And then at the same time, if I stepped outside, like the vastness of the sky would feel like it was too much, and I'd want to kind of go back inside. Yeah, it was very. I actually remember specifically at the start, in a couple of days after the DP and DR kicked off for me. That specifically was like I was trying to will myself back into like normal 3D vision. I was like, this is going to like, what's wrong? Like, I feel like I'm a bit high. I feel like I haven't slept, even though I had slept. But I was trying to I click it back into normal 3D vision, and it wouldn't go back. Like, you know.
Yeah. And recognizing things, you know, looking at your phone and thinking that's not my phone, or, you know, your belongings, and really just questioning, is that really mine? It was all just really, really strange, but they all come together with this disorder, which links back to anxiety.
Or also like looking at your phone and then starting to think like, how does the phone work? How is the phone connecting to another phone like down the road or on the other side of the world? Like, and also how is the screen displaying text? How am I understanding the text? And then realizing I've been looking at my phone for 10 minutes and I was supposed to send a text 10 minutes ago. and then thinking, where did that time go? And like, am I losing my memory? And it's this whole snowball of things.
It's just a cycle. It keeps going on and on and on. It never ends. And I think when you do get through the recovery, you kind of get sick of it. You really get like over it. Like you just don't want to have these thoughts anymore. So you just kind of try to ignore it and just move on with life.
Yeah.
And that's how you know you're recovering, because it's not really a big deal anymore. Like you're not making it significant.
Yeah, absolutely. That's like a major thing of recovery, was that like like those types of thoughts, the ones we were just talking about, when you're going through those in the context of anxiety, those thoughts feel absolutely terrifying. Like they feel profound and existential and philosophical. And then as you recover and the anxiety that underlies those things starts to fade away and stop, then if you have those thoughts, they're just annoying. They're annoying and stupid, because you're like, I just want to send a text, like, you know, and then, but that's a really good sign, because it demonstrates that you're thinking about those thoughts in the context in which they deserve to be thought about, which is that they're a waste of time. Like again, these thoughts are the mental equivalent of muscle tension and heart palpitations and sweating. They're not there because of any logical underpinning. They're there because you feel anxious. That's it. Yeah. That's all. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And same with the visual stuff, like combined with like the fight or flight visual symptoms, like your pupils are dilated, your your awareness of your peripheral vision is heightened, your visual cortex is on higher alert. So take all those things and look up at the sky, and it's going to feel weird. Or look around your family home, it's going to feel weird. Or look at the screen on your phone, and you're going to think something's wrong. My vision's damaged, and all this kind of thing. But it's not. Like,
yeah.
yeah.
Definitely.
So, at what point, Laura, did your recovery start?
It started after I used your manual, and I also did try the little bit of medication to help me to get through it. With Ativan, it helped me to be grounded and to actually feel my body, and then I didn't need it less and less, and I just kept working through everything that I learned through your videos, and then it just every day just got better. I started to forget about it less, all the existential thoughts and things like that, and I started noticing that I was actually living life again, and I was getting that routine again. That was another big thing for me, sticking to a really good routine of having good sleep and things like that really helped my recovery. So yeah, avoiding caffeine, smoking, drinking, things like that. Anything that will cause you a lot of anxiety. Well, anything that races your heart, because that turns into anxiety anyway. But I'm not saying like avoid anything that causes anxiety, like social settings. I think you really need to push yourself to do that kind of stuff, even if you don't feel real. Because there's moments and when you're talking to other people and you do feel like you do get distracted, because if someone's talking to you, you can't constantly think about DPDR. It takes you out of it. So I think forcing yourself to do social interaction, just going to do work, like a lot of people quit their jobs and do things like that. I don't think that's something you should do at all.
Yeah, that was certainly something that I did as well. I stopped working. I was a full-time musician at the time. I stopped all my gigs, and I went home and lived with my parents, which felt like the right thing to do, but it was not the right thing to do in retrospect, because it just allowed me all day, every day to sit around researching the condition.
Yes. It gives you more time to do everything.
Yeah. It's like anxiety will take up as much space as you give it, and only as much space as you give it. Yeah. So the mistake that we make is we think that, well, what I need to do is I need to put my life on hold until I sort this anxiety out.
Yeah.
Which again ostensibly makes sense, but what's actually happening is you are giving it all of the space to take up in your day, and research and talking about it and reading about it. And yeah.
And a lot of people think that they can just think themselves their way out of it. You can't do it like that. You really can't.
Yeah. The example I always like to give, and I'm sure you've heard it plenty of times, Laura, is the thing of, like, you know, having a song stuck in your head, because that's essentially what it is. It's just a thought that's stuck in your head, and you keep checking on it, and you're finding it hard to let it go. But you can't think your way out of having a song stuck in your head. You can still absolutely get rid of it, but you can't do that by checking in on the song and saying, I need to forget this. Why haven't I forgotten it? I need to forget this by 2:00 tomorrow because I got a meeting. You know, it's just But what you can do is consistently focus away from it. And it's interesting you mentioned the thing of like socializing, having conversations as well. It's such a positive thing to do. It can be quite a difficult thing, especially for people who are going through in the middle of like DP and DR. It certainly was for me, because I would find it when I was speaking to people, I found it very hard to focus on the conversation, and I would keep focusing on my own voice. Yeah. And I'd be like, that my voice sounds a bit weird, like, you know, how are the words coming out of my mouth and going into the person's brain and the opposite way, and then I've lost track of what the conversation is actually about.
Or it's like wondering if they're real as well.
Yeah. Totally.
having those
Totally.
thoughts when people in front of you thinking, are you actually real? Are you part of my imagination?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
being freaked out about that.
Yeah.
That
So
was
common.
a big thing.
So common. And again, it's that thing of like when you're going through it, it feels the thoughts feel so deeply, profoundly strange that it really like rattles you, and it's hard to get back to the chat about like the soccer game last night. Like you can't just get, why are we talking about this when I'm thinking about the literal nature of reality, like, you know?
Yeah.
But again, what you figure out as you recover, and part of recovery is understanding that like the chat about the soccer game makes a lot more sense than all these big, massive, scary thoughts, because those massive, scary thoughts aren't based on anything. They're not based on anything.
Yeah.
They're not based on any logic or any evidence. At least the soccer game happened, like, you know, at least the soccer game was on last night. You know?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And these thoughts, they're very interesting topics, and they're something that you should do in your leisure time if you want to research about, you know, how the universe was created, if you want to research about God. Like, you can still do that if you really want to understand, but it shouldn't get to the point where you're getting freaked out about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is something I speak to people about often, is like, people ask me like, or, you know, do you read like sci-fi or philosophy? And like, yeah, God, of course I do. I love sci-fi. I mean, I could watch the Matrix on a loop. Like, I love that movie, you know?
Yeah.
But while I was recovering from anxiety and DP, I had to give myself the time and the space to get out of that anxious thought habit by focusing away from those types of things. And once I was out of it, and that context of undue anxiety was gone, that filter of fight or flight anxiety was gone, then I was able to get back to like philosophy, science fiction, and just be like, oh wow, I love this. Of course, like I always loved this, like, you know. And the whole thing of me being frightened of this stuff didn't happen because of the content of the material. It happened because I was having anxiety. I was having basically a panic attack. Like, that's why it was happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's only because you have really bad anxiety that it's that fight or flight that you were saying. It's we think there's a threat, and it's constant. It doesn't get switched off. So everything is really hard. Really bad anxiety with everything. Yeah.
And it's like, you know, it's like if you're experiencing fight or flight response, if you're experiencing anxiety, and you see like a grizzly bear, like, you know, then you say, okay, like there's a part of you that kind of latches the fight or flight onto the experience of seeing the grizzly bear, and there's a reason for it. So when you extract yourself from that situation, the anxiety is given permission to fade away and stop, because, well, there was a grizzly bear in there, like, you know, so I'm safe now. I'm okay. I can get back to normal. Whereas if you have that same experience, but there's no bear there and there's nothing wrong, and you're just having a chat with your friends or you're watching a movie, then that sense of fear becomes kind of almost inverted upon yourself, because you start to think, well, there's something wrong with me. I must be going crazy. I must be dying. I'm having a heart attack. Something terrible is happening. I'm in a dream and I can't wake up. All these different things, and then it turns into a loop because of that. Because that checking thing that we talked about earlier becomes, you know, becomes part of your daily routine, your hourly routine, minutely routine, or whatever. But it's a scary thing to go through. But what I meant to say with all that, Laura, was that when you're in that state of kind of that inverted fight or flight, your brain is essentially constantly saying like, there's danger here somewhere. It's somewhere around here. So then you look at the cup of coffee. Well, that's not a good example. Let me think of something else. You look at the business card and you say, oh, but there's something dangerous about the business card. You look up at the sky. There's something dangerous about the sky. But it's everywhere. But it's not about what you're focusing on. it's about the anxiety that's searching for a reason to be there, that's driving the fear behind it. That's that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's something you mentioned
Yeah.
actually earlier. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go first. You go.
I was just going to say, Laura, that's something you mentioned. You mentioned earlier. Was a fear of the sky in particular, and I remember that was something that was a huge thing for me. Was like I'd walk outside, I'd look up at the sky and just be completely overwhelmed by it, and it would almost feel like it was falling down on top of me, and I would find it very hard to do anything.
Yeah, me too. I don't know what it is about, the sky, and also reading, seeing words, like seeing the word life and thinking, what is life? Where did life come from? Just crazy things like that. But yeah, I think because the sky is so big and it's empty, this is probably, I don't want it to be a trigger for anyone, but it doesn't make sense. Things don't make sense around you. You don't make sense. Humans don't make sense at all. Like at the time, but when you go through it, you understand, why everything is here, why everything happened. And you understand humans isn't a scary thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and again, like it's
And I mean,
not.
I can laugh about it now because I've gone through it, but it is so real when you're going through that.
Yeah.
Like you, me, both know the panic attacks are intense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And it was something I noticed as well as I recovered was that like it was that type of thinking. So I would think about like the sky and think, okay, but like so the sky is huge, and then there's the size of the universe, and these things would like absolutely terrify me. But then like if I was again come back to the cup of coffee, so if I look at the cup of coffee, and I would start to think about like how is the cup holding the liquid inside it?
Yeah.
Why doesn't the liquid just fall through the particles of the cup, like, and that and a
Yeah.
thought like, and I'd start thinking that thought, and then I'd maybe research
Yeah.
it, and I'd absolutely start to freak out and panic about it. But what that and at the
Yeah, me
time
too.
it was
Yeah.
yeah, but at the time that was particularly frightening. But then when I was recovering, I realized that like that thought about the cup was the same thing as the thought about the sky, was the same thing about
Mm.
like me focusing on my voice when I was trying to have a conversation with someone. And again, it's not about the content of the thought. It's just your anxious brain saying like, are you in danger?
Yeah.
Is the danger coming from the
It's
cup?
just,
Is it coming
yeah.
from the sky? Is it coming from your voice? It's yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's just anxiety. It really is. That's all it is.
yeah,
And
yeah.
people need to really understand that and believe that.
What did your recovery feel like? Or so so
My
recovery. Yeah, please go ahead.
my recovery was slow, but I started to notice little changes every couple of days. So it went from having these thoughts constantly to every hour to a few times a day. And eventually it would be like a couple times a week. But I stopped researching. I just went on with things. And then just went back to my normal routine. And it honestly just feels like a memory now. It's upsetting that I had gone through that, but it's just the way it is. With people who have anxiety, you just understand that sometimes you just have to go through things like that in life, and it can make you a better person in a lot of ways, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was my recovery. It was very slow, but yeah, you're noticing little changes every single day.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm
absolutely. I
sure
think
it's different for everyone. It's honestly different for everyone. It matters on how much you use what's in the manual, if you do use the manual. Um, if you're exercising, if you're eating healthy, if you're sleeping well, everything like that combines into it. And dealing with day-to-day stress, you really have to work out how you're going to handle that everyday stress, because as soon as you get something that brings up anxiety, it could bring you straight back into it.
it takes it can take people, same with recovery from any anxiety-based condition, it takes people different amount of time, but ultimately everyone can recover from it completely. But it's a really good description of, and it was the same for me. It was small changes, but they were happening consistently, and I would notice them. So I'd be like, okay, I can focus on a conversation for a bit longer than I was able to do a few days ago, or
Yeah.
I can listen to this piece of music, which kind of used to freak me out like a couple of weeks ago, and but you just keep doing it. And for me, it was like the anxiety became less and less of a point of focus throughout my day. Then it felt like it was just not important anymore. And it's like if I wanted to
Yeah.
do something, like if my friends say, okay, well, we're going to go to the cinema tonight, I'd be like, okay, I'll go to the cinema, as opposed to consulting the anxiety to see if it was okay, if the anxiety was okay with me going to the
Yeah.
cinema.
Yeah.
What's the film? Is it a sci-fi? I better check with my anxiety.
Yeah.
That
But yeah.
became less and less, and then it got to a point where I was like, I I would have days at a time where I hadn't thought about it at all, and I just didn't care. I was like, but sure, yeah, I understand why that happened. It was frightening, but it didn't hurt
Yeah.
me. And also, I mean, I guess for me, like getting back to normal was like literally getting back to normal, like almost boringly so. But I do one thing I do definitely I did definitely take from the experience was I had a stronger sense of empathy for people who go through things like this. Because I think in the past I would have probably thought like, well, if you've got anxiety, just just don't have anxiety or just kind of push through it or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I, having gone through it and realizing the, just how terrifying it is to have a panic attack or things of DP and DR when there's no apparent reason for them happening, and thinking that you're going crazy or that you're going to die, that really gave me a strong sense of empathy for people who go through anxiety-based conditions or
Definitely.
anything like that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It makes you a better person because you want to help people after you've been through it, I think. Well, that's what you're doing now. And I think that's amazing. So yeah, it definitely does make you a better person.
Well, I mean, most people do go through some experience of anxiety throughout the course of their lives. I mean, I think for most people, it's like most people will have some experience with like a panic attack, like or some extended thing with anxiety. Um, but it's because most people will go through like some intense experience with like would be grief or trauma at some point in their lives. But the great thing about having gone through it is that you can identify it, and you know, because the only reason it turned into a problem in the first place, or an ongoing problem, was that was that was noticing a symptom of anxiety and catastrophizing that it meant that something was wrong. So worrying that the feeling of disconnection that happens with anxiety meant that we were going crazy or going to die or whatever. So one of the great things about having gone through it is that you have that experience under your belt, and you say, so that like if you do feel anxiety again, you spot it and you can contextualize it within a healthy, practical context and say, okay, I know
Yeah.
what this is, as opposed to like a feeling disconnection mean that you're going crazy, or that your heart beating quickly means that you're having a heart attack or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. You have to really work out how to talk yourself through day-to-day anxieties. And I think I didn't deal with a lot of stuff. I used to just get really anxious. That was my first reaction. But now I really try and process things and don't let myself get to that point. Or if I do, it's just for like a few seconds and then I just get through it.
Yeah.
And, things like deep breathing, going for a walk, distractions all help now.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. And how was the DP manual helpful in your recovery, Laura?
It was amazing because everything is there, everything's laid out in different folders. So you can click onto them, go into the videos, and it's there. So you can go back to them and just keep checking to reassure yourself. So during the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, if you have panic attacks, you can go in there and remind yourself that, this is normal. This is what he's saying, that it is normal to have this, and it's just anxiety. And then go about for another hour, go back into it if you have to. But yeah, it was really, really helpful. And it's good that there were videos too, and they were for like 30 minutes. They weren't just like something you had to read through and get the answer.
Yeah.
And I think you said a lot of things. Like, you were very honest about it too. You said, I lost a lot of weight during that time. I wasn't eating. And you posted a picture of yourself as well of when you first got it. And I was like, wow, it's like, yeah, definitely two different people. You can see in your eyes that you like really were anxious and in that moment panic. And I look at myself back at the time and I see that as well. So it was just really good to relate to that. And I could always email if I needed to as well. And it wasn't $2,000 to pay for the manual where I didn't get any help at all. So yeah, really thankful for that.
Of course, I'm so happy to hear this. That it was helpful. That's really wonderful. So now that you've recovered, what's your day-to-day life like at the moment? I mean, I presume you're just extremely busy being a new mom, but
I'm really busy being a mum.
Yeah.
I can enjoy my life. It feels like in a lot of ways I'm being reborn again because I miss a lot of chunks out of my life. So I'm really just planning a lot of fun things to do every weekend I can, enjoying every day that I'm alive, and just really appreciating everything. And yeah, working part-time and yeah, going back to my normal routine. Love cooking, love reading, things like that. So yeah.
That's great. That's so good
Yeah.
to hear. I've got
I
one
think
more
just
question.
going back to normal life is like the most amazing thing that you can have, Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So I've got one more question for you, Laura. So there might be people watching the channel, this video now, who are going through DPDR for the first time, maybe similar to what you went through when you were 13 or again at 24. For people going through DPDR, as someone who has recovered, what advice would you have for them?
You're not going into psychosis. You don't have schizophrenia. You're not losing your mind. Stay off the forums. They are the worst thing. Don't talk to people who have had it for their whole life and they haven't recovered. Just focus on the manual. Focus on eating healthy, exercising, getting a good sleep, meditating, deep breathing. If you have to try a little bit of medication to feel your body again and to feel grounded, do that for a little bit. But that's not going to fix you long term. I think you just keep doing the work and and reach out if you have to positive people who have been through it before and who have recovered. It's a whole mixture of things as well, but mainly doing that work is what's going to get you through it.
Laura, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you so much for your insight and for your experience. I'm delighted that you've recovered and that the DP manual was a part of that process. And I'm sure that anybody watching this on the channel will find your story very informative and inspirational.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And good luck, everyone, with this journey.
Great stuff. Thanks so much, Laura. Take care.
That's okay. Thank you. Bye.